Hi everyone. So in this particular class, we would be basically discussing the introduction regarding CM1. I have highlighted the following topics. I hope that is visible to all of you on the screen. These are the 10 pointers which we would be discussing. I expect the session to be of roughly 1 to 1.5 hours, and then post that if you all have any doubts with respect to paper, how to go about a preparation, so on, we would be taking that as well. So to begin with CM1, to give a paper description what all it is about, in very short or at a very high level, it deals with time value of money. So a lot of you might have encountered through some of your studies, be it at the school level or at university level, regarding simple interest, compound interest. So the basic essence of paper is that there is a time value of money. 100 rupees which you are gonna receive today is gonna be different from 100 rupees which you will receive say after 5 years. So you cannot compare any cash flows which are at different points of time directly. As I mentioned, and I will be keep repeating this in a couple of lectures, that 100 rupees today is not directly comparable to 100 rupees after few years, or even if it's say 200 rupees after few years. You cannot say that the value of 200 which you will receive after 5 years is double of the value of rupees 100 which you give today. So post the completion of let's say the first part of CM1, you'll be in a position to appreciate that there is something called time value of money. Secondly, in the second half of CM1, you would be covering various different types of insurance contracts. So CM1 in whole basically, I would say, discusses primarily about life insurance. So we would take a look at what exactly is insurance. Some of you might have a basic idea. We'll just try to touch upon them. Under insurance, we have a section called life insurance. We have something called health insurance. We also have something called general insurance, and so on. So CM1 primarily deals with life insurance, and you could say there is one chapter which does touch upon certain parts of health insurance. As for general insurance, that is something which is covered in a separate paper. A part of it, just the statistical part, is covered in CS1, and the major chunk of it is, let's say, covered in paper CS2, and a small part is covered in paper CM2. So this is about the paper description. Compared to, I would say, all initial papers, CM1 is the most scoring paper. If you would have a talk to your peers or your seniors who have already appeared for the paper, you would have an idea that it is, I would say, relatively easier to score pretty high marks. Students have scored as high as 98 out of 100. Scoring a 80 plus or a 90 plus compared to all other papers is, the easiest in CM1. The only difficulty which students have in CM1 is that the content is very high and you need to devote a lot of time to practice. After a point of time, I wouldn't say that you need to apply a lot of your brain to solve questions. The type of questions which the institute has been asking broadly remains the same. So the only effort which goes in practicing. And again, trust me, that is going to be very, very challenging, because at a point of time, let's say when we are solving questions from the second half of the syllabus, solving one question at the first go could take you an hour, and in case you take up any wrong values, or you perform any sort of calculation errors, it would take you, close to, let's say, another 30 minutes just to get the calculations correct. And doing this again and again for 100 or 200 questions in itself becomes a challenge. Again, not to your brain maybe, because almost after a particular point of time questions are going to remain same in nature, but the amount of physical effort you need to put, in solving things again and again, specifically when you're committing some mistake, that is going to be challenging. But again, as I mentioned, this is one of those papers which is extremely scoring. From the point of view of job interviews and all, at least in India, most of the companies right now, I would say, operates in life insurance. The general insurance market is slightly smaller as of now. It's expected to grow at a significant higher pace, but bulk of the recruitment takes place through CM1 only. Also, that ones who are appearing for the first paper in the form of CM1, uh, you you would realize that a lot of concepts which you're going to study here are going to be extremely critical at the time of you're giving your interviews. So right now you might be preparing for this paper. It could be you're in your first year or second year. You might be sitting for a job interview after a couple of years. So whatever you're studying right now, try to gain the concepts, because at a later stage, it wouldn't be possible for you to cover the entire paper again. And let me again tell you that this remains one of the most key papers, especially if you intend to work in life insurance, or even if you're giving any job interviews. So overall, I would say that of all the initial 6 papers, that is CM1, CM2, CS1, CS2, CB1, and CB2, CM1 I would say is the most scoring one, and also it is relatively easier to clear. Just that you need to have practiced a lot, because what might initially take you 1 hour to solve a particular question, only through repeated practice you would be able to cut down the time to, let's say, a 30 minutes or a 40 minutes or so. Also for the paper B part, that is the Excel, I would be talking more in details shortly regarding that. The application which you're going to study here is something which will really help you once you start working, specifically in a life insurance sector. Of all the papers you would be studying at the initial level, the closest you're going to get with respect to what you're going to study right now and what actually is required once you start working in a corporate setup, that is basically CM1, be it the conceptual parts of paper A or be it the application over Microsoft Excel through paper B as well. So this was a brief description, brief description regarding the paper. Next thing which we are going to move is the prerequisite knowledge. What all knowledge do you require before starting with CM1? So ones who are studying for this as their first paper, I mean, you need to know English simply because the exams are in English mode. Secondly, you need to know the concept of maths covered till class 12. More specifically, basic calculus, integration, differentiation, limits. You need to know arithmetic progression, geometric progression, and you need to, let's say, just be a bit more comfortable with exponential logs, so on. Apart from this, nothing else is required as such. At certain places, 1 or 2 things at a more higher level might be required. That is something we would be covering through our class itself. For the second half of CM1, that is from chapter 14 onwards, students also need to know basic, let's say, knowledge about something called a random variable, probability, expectation, variance. Ones who have, let's say, prepared for ASET in a very structured way, or who have studied for CS1 previously, you would have already covered this. For ones who are appearing for their first examination in form of CM1, don't worry, there would be a separate lecture or a video which we would be making available to you all, which would be covering the statistical portions that would be required more so from chapter 14 onwards. For the first 13 chapters or so, you wouldn't be requiring this. So at a later stage, I would be probably taking a live session or sharing a video, which is basically from CS1, that the knowledge of which you would be requiring in CM1 as well. Keep in mind, you do not have to have studied CS1 completely to sit for CM1. There's just only a single lecture, mostly covering about topics random variable, expectation, variance, which would be required. So that is the prerequisite. As for links to other papers, where knowledge of CM1 comes in place, there would be certain portions when you study for paper CB1, which is basically finance and accounts based. Certain concepts which are studied in CM1 would be there. When you are studying for paper CS2, again, few of the topics or few of the concepts you have studied in CM1 would be similar to what you study in CS2. As well as while preparing for CM2, it is assumed that students do have some basic knowledge about CM1. And then finally, when you go to higher papers, be it CP1, CP2, CP3, or even the specific SP papers relevant for life insurance, all of these assumes that a student does have the knowledge for paper CM1. So this was regarding the prerequisite knowledge. Next section is calculator, which calculator you would be requiring, whether it's for purpose of CM1 or for the purpose of, I would say, all actuarial exams. Do note that IFoA right now, given the online set of exams, does not have any restriction on the choice of calculator to be used. You can use any calculator, any sort of higher versions. Previous to pre-pandemic, when the exams were held in the offline mode mostly, that is center-based exams, there were a specific set of calculators which the institute had allowed. The list of that is something which was available on the institute website. For our purpose, the calculator which we would be using is, this is the recommended one and the one we would be using in the class. In case you do not have this calculator, please do buy it at the earliest. This should be available at, if you're based out of India, it would be available on Flipkart, Amazon, or you could try at a local stationery shop as well. And for ones who are outside, you can take a look at relevant e-commerce websites or local shops for this particular model. So this is the calculator which we will be requiring for our purpose, and we would be requiring it at a very extensive level. For other papers, the use of calculator is sort of restrictive in nature, but for CM1, ultimately it's all about calculation and how efficiently you calculate it. Next thing which we have is actuarial tables. So to whenever you're sitting for the examinations, there is a particular material which you're allowed to carry or which you are allowed to use at the time of sitting for exams, which we basically refer to as actuarial tables. This has a lot of common used formulas, certain knowledge about distributions, certain pre-calculated values, which you can directly use at the time of examination. Do note that when the exams were held offline in nature, for IFoA, you were not supposed to carry this. You were provided with actual tables during examination, but the ones who would be appearing from IAI, you would have to carry your own set of actual tables. For current set of examinations, which is the online mode, for IFoA, you could use with any sort of Xerox because it's not a proctored exam. So you can use, whether you're buying it directly from the institute or you're taking a photocopy, any sort of medium is fine for actual tables. For IAI, you cannot use any soft copy as such. You need to have a hard copy and ideally something which you have bought from the institute itself. The Xerox version should also work, but do keep in mind that nothing is written over it because that might not be accepted at the time of sitting for the examination. One thing which I missed out was, as for calculator for IAI examinations, there is again a restriction on which calculators can be used. So again, keeping that in mind, this calculator remains relevant whether you're sitting for examinations from IFoA or IAI, at least for the 2022 sessions, be it July, be it September, or be it the December session. So just to give you a brief look, how the actual tables actually looks like. This is it's almost a 200 pager thing. So you will see that in page number 7 or so, there's a list of formula, or I would say more so a content. First, we have certain mathematical methods, then we have statistical distribution, statistical methods, compound interest, so on. For our purpose, little bit might be required from mathematical methods, that is from page number 2 to page number 5, and the bulk of it would be required, I mean this entire section, which is compound interest. This would be required. Then annuities and assurances, that would be required. And then beyond page 45, let me just go through there and show you all the section. So this is the compound interest table section. Starting from this, there would be around say 20 or 25 pages which would be required. And then again, there is a life table section starting, if I'm not wrong, something around 84. So before that, we have certain called life tables. What exactly it is, we would be covering at a later stage, but just to give you an idea. Starting from page 74 till, let's say, till page 110 or 120, this would be required. Certain calculations you can take the help of tables. The same can be performed directly on calculator as well. Which one you need to use depends on where you are being more convenient. So there is no restriction. You should be using calculator only to perform all calculations, or actual tables only for certain specific, let's say, topics. The same thing can be calculated either from calculator or through tables, but some values are going to remain on the tables only. So you need to use that as reference. So this was regarding the actual tables. Next topic is coming to the paper pattern, the exam format, and the pass marks, be it for the IFoA or IAI. So we will look at, IFoA in all certainty intends to keep the exams in online format only. Although starting from 2023 onwards, they are planning to make, shift the way the exams are conducted to OBA mode, which is basically objective based assessment. So they'll be starting with paper CB1 and CB2, and where they are gonna shift it to completely MCQ level. Whether the same they would be doing for CM1 or even other papers, we need to wait for, to get more official confirmation regarding them. As of now, at least for the 2022 session, I'm talking about the, the structure for the September term, or be it for the July term or the December term. So firstly, CM1 has two parts. One is basically what we refer to as the paper A, and the second is nothing but paper B. Both are of 100 marks. This is both from IFoA as well as IAI. Now, paper A is more commonly referred to as, let's say, the theoretical examination or the written examination, which is going to basically test your conceptual knowledge. Paper B is the application of whatever you've studied in paper A on or using Microsoft Excel. Now, first I will be starting with IFoA. There is no need to individually pass in paper A and paper B. There is no individual need. That is, it is not that you need to have a minimum marks in paper A or a minimum marks in paper B. It doesn't work like that. 70% weightage is given to paper A, 30% weightage is given to paper B. Using this, out of 100, a marks is generated on the basis of which you either clear complete CM1 or you do not clear complete CM1. It's not that you clear just the paper A part or the paper B part. So for example, let's say in paper A you score a 80 out of 100, and in paper B, let's say you score 70 out of 100. So 70% I would be getting 56 over here, and a 30% I would be getting 21 over here. On adding, I would be getting 77. On the basis of this marks, you shall be either clearing the paper or failing your examination. So this is how it works for IFoA. Do note that it is compulsory that you sit for paper A and paper B both. Not sitting for paper B, sitting for exam, getting a 0, these are different things. You might wonder how both are equivalent to getting 0 only, but at least as of date, IFoA has mentioned that a student needs to submit the answer script both for paper A and paper B. If you haven't submitted it for either paper A or paper B, you wouldn't be clearing the exam. Do note that why I specifically mentioned about paper B is because if you haven't submitted paper A, there is no possibility that you would be clearing the exam, given that it has a weightage of 70%. Theoretically speaking, if you do not submit paper B, your marks could be something which is more than the pass marks, but you won't be deemed to be passed. So you need to submit both the examinations. So just theoretically speaking, let's say you score a 90 out of 100 in paper A. You sit for paper B, and let's say you submit a blank document and you score a 0 out of 100. A 70% weightage results in 63, and this 30% weightage results in 0. Your total marks is nothing but 63. Assuming that the pass marks is less than 63, you would be clearing the paper. But had you not appeared for paper B itself, in that case, you wouldn't be clearing CM1. So this is for IFoA. The pass marks has been mostly in the range of, let's say, 53 to 60. Conservatively, let's assume that the pass marks is going to remain 60 only. Do note that the pass marks for a particular session is released once the results are declared. Beforehand, we do not know what is going to be the pass marks for any paper. So keep that in mind. Depending on the difficulty of paper, what the examiners think, the pass marks could be somewhere in the low 50s, or it could even go to high 60s. For CM1, it has usually been in the range of 53 to 60 itself, and let's assume that it's going to remain 60 only at a very conservative level. For IAI, the pass marks, at least as of now, has been fixed as 50. Previously, they had mentioned that a student needs to individually clear both paper A and paper B. If that holds true, then the 70% and 30% ratio does not make sense, at least from clearing point. Because if you are scoring more than 50 both in paper A and paper B, whatever weightage you give, you are going to get final marks which is more than 50 only, and you would be clearing the examination. But yeah, just for the purpose of getting the final marks, or let's say in case you feel you might secure a rank or not, In that case, what they have said is, 70% weightage is given to paper A and a 30% weightage is given to paper B. This is regarding the pass marks. As for how exams are going to be conducted, let's begin with IFoA. For September 2022 session, the exams are gonna remain home-based, online mode only. Paper B is using Microsoft Excel only. At least as of date, the exam duration is 1 hour 50 minutes. Again, this is something which could change. Previously, it was 1 hour 45 minutes. Last term, it had been increased to 1 hour 50 minutes. This includes everything: reading, writing, printing, anything. You are not allowed to write anything beyond 1 hour 50 minutes. In case you do that, this session onwards, students who have their modified time or the last saved time, even 2 to 5 minutes after the ending time, they have received emails from IFoA asking them to explain why their modified time was beyond the examination time. So going forward, they are going to be more stringent with their time requirements. So do ensure that you're not writing anything after the stipulated time, because our answer scripts might not be accepted. And we have experienced this with some of our students where their answer scripts were not accepted if they had continued to make workings beyond the examination time. Paper A is 3 hour 20 minutes. Right now, you need to do it basically on MS Word. You need to go about typing it everything on MS Word. For the July 2022 IAI session, exams are gonna remain home-based, online only. Do note that IAI exams are proctored. That is, a webcam needs to be on and somebody is monitoring you. With IFoA, that is not the case currently. This is for the July term. For December term, IA has shown its intention through an official confirmation that if the COVID situation permits, they do intend to take the offline examinations. Now, whether they do take finally offline or online, that is something we need to wait as we approach towards the December month. There are no MCQs in CM1. Whether it was before pandemic or after that, MCQs aren't right now part of CM1. From IFoA, from IAI, at least for July term, MCQs are expected. These could be anywhere between, let's say, 10 to 40 proportion of the examination. You are not expected to provide any sort of workings for MCQ based questions. You just need to give the final option and just leave it there itself. So for IFoA, do not expect any sort of MCQs because that hasn't come in the previous terms, nor has there been any change of communication. So there are no MCQs. For IAI, July term, yes, there should be MCQs unless they make a ad hoc discretion, change and do not communicate it. For the December term, we need to see whether the exams are offline in nature. When the exams were in fact offline in nature, there were no MCQs for the paper A part. Paper B is going to remain the same only. It's going to be held on Microsoft Excel, whether it's from IFoA or IAI. So this was regarding the paper pattern format of exam as well as the pass marks. Next thing which we would be looking at is the number of chapters which we have. Which chapters are the ones where students generally find difficulty? Is there any sort of connection or relation between the different chapters? In certain papers, it could be that a lot of topics are independent. Let's just take a look at what is the case for CM1. So as per the latest material, that is the 2022 version, which we are sharing with all of you, there are 27 chapters. Ones who were using, let's say, the 2019 version, will be seeing that there are 28 chapters. Chapter 1 of 2019 version is not there in our current syllabus. So please keep that in mind. Apart from that, all the chapter names remains the same. What you basically had chapter 2 in 2019 version of material is what you have as chapter 1 in the 2022 version. Apart from that, there is no other significant change in your CM1. So in case you're looking at any pre-recorded lecture, do not focus on the chapter number, but rather focus on the name of the chapter. It could be that what I was referring to as chapter 18 in some of the lectures recorded previously, that is basically actual chapter number 17. So just take a look at the naming of the video and you would be easily able to relate to what is the exact chapter number in the 2022 version of the material. So we have in total 27 chapters. Name of the chapters is given in this section. Number of pages has been given. These 27 chapters have been divided into 5 parts. So the first part corresponds to chapter number 1 to 9, second part corresponds to chapter number 10 to 13, and so on. You will also see something called X assignments, Y assignments. So what exactly are these? You could treat this as mock examinations. So your X assignment 1 basically has questions pertaining to chapter 1 to chapter number 9. X2 will have questions from chapter 10 to chapter 13, so on. This could be of either 80 marks or 100 marks. Do note in mind, once using the 2022 version, there are certain changes in the questions in the X assignments they have been given, which are more in line with the current online set of examinations. So the ideal way is, let's say once I've covered, let's say these 9 chapters, everything, all reading the material, taking a look at the conceptual lectures, as well as covering all the questions for practice, you should be then sitting for X1 under proper exam conditions. Sit for the paper, you could do it on MS Word. We will be shortly coming to it, how to go about it. You could also do it on paper if you want to for the right now, but do mark yourself and see how much you are scoring. Again, let me tell you all, ones who are studying for their first paper or even the second or the third paper, CM1 will require a lot of practice from your end. Of all the papers, we not say that CM1 requires the highest amount of time. Again, it's not that because it is difficult. It is simply because that you need to practice a lot so that you are able to cut down your time. A 30 marks question, let's say, or let's take a 20 marks question. Ideally you would be devoting maximum of 40 minutes to it, because you have 200 minutes at least from IFoA for a 100 marks paper. Initially it could take you 1 hour, 1 hour 20 minutes to solve that question. That is on paper. I'm not even saying on MS Word. Only when you have practiced significantly will you be able to reduce the time. This sort of difficulty is something you will not experience till chapter 13. From chapter 14 onwards, you will see there is tremendous amount of calculations. You will actually, you would be requiring your actuarial tables, you would be requiring a calculator, you would be requiring again a notebook as well, and you would have to refer to each and every one of them to perform calculations. At least for the first couple of chapters, the calculations are not going to be that difficult. Once we start with chapter 14 and more so proceed with chapter number 18, 19, you will realize the quantum of calculations you need to perform. And that needs to be done because only by practicing that will you be able to cut down on your time to solve a particular question. And the amount of errors which you're going to make. Just a moment. Coming back to it again, the amount of errors which you're going to make is very normal. Just keep in mind, when you are starting with practicing questions, there would be a lot of silly calculation errors which you would be performing. That is extremely normal. Don't get demotivated with it. Even at times when I am solving questions, it's all, I would say it's very easy that at the end I would be making some or the other sort of error. So just keep in mind, don't try to go for any shortcuts right now. After a particular stage, once you have practiced significantly, you might wish to skip certain steps, but that should only come if you have a very high level of accuracy as well as efficiency. Other than that, stick to the steps, because at least in IFoA you do get full step marks. A lot of students do not get the entire answer correct, but if they have provided the relevant steps, even if their final answer is wrong, they could end up scoring 60 to 80% of the allotted marks, which is pretty decent. Even if you're getting the final answer wrong, out of let's say 10 marks, you would be getting a 6 mark or an 8 mark if you have given the relevant steps. If you're not giving that, in that case, that could be a issue. So this is regarding the number of chapters I have talked about. As for the the connection part, I am intending to start with chapter 2. Chapter 1 is a theoretical chapter. In fact, even chapter 2 is a theoretical chapter. Usually, I used to start with time value of money, which is chapter 3. As per 2019 curriculum, it is chapter 4. So we have certain videos available on our YouTube channel. If you will take a look at that, I am starting with chapter 4, given as time value of money. This term I intend to start with chapter 2, which will basically cover a few of the, let's say, terminologies, which will actually help you when you go on to other chapters as well. Chapter 1 is something which we would be doing towards the end of the session. So now, Starting from chapter 2, chapter 2 will give you just a brief regarding the different sort of products you would be looking at. We would be studying them in more detail through other chapters. Chapter 4 is the starting point. Chapter 3 is the starting point. Chapter 4 will draw upon the knowledge of chapter 3. Chapter 5 uses chapter 3 and 4, and so on. Till chapter 9, each chapter draws knowledge from the previous chapter. Chapter 10 to chapter number 13 assumes that you know everything from chapter number 3 to chapter number 9. So in case, let's say, you are missing out on chapter 6, most probably you won't be able to completely follow what is being done in chapter 7. If you have not covered, let's say, the chapter number 3 to chapter number 9, you might face difficulty in chapter 10, 11, 12 or 13, so on. Starting from chapter 14, it is a completely different shift. Things again, we would be starting from the scratch, lot of notations we would be describing. From chapter 14, it is just assumed that students do have complete idea from chapter number 3 to chapter number 9. So you could take chapter number 3 to chapter number 9 as the basic which is required for the entire paper. Things start to get a bit more complicated, because we will see later that chapter number 1 to 9 just sets the base. Proportion wise, these could maybe test, let's say, 10 to 20% of the paper only. Bulk of it comes from the other chapters. Chapter 10 is independent of 11, 11 is independent of 12, and so on with 13. Once you start with chapter 14, almost all the other chapters are connected. You cannot sit for chapter 15 without chapter 14. You cannot sit for, let's say, chapter 16 without 14 or 15. Similarly for 17, so on. So in CM1, even if you have a lag of, let's say, 1 week or a 2 week, and you're missing the live classes, not taking a look at the recorded lectures, things will get really difficult for you. If you try to attend what is happening in the online sessions, you would be completely blank. In my last 2 years of experience in online session, we start with the classes, let's say 50 students are coming in the first 1 month. By the time we go to the third month, not even 5 students come to the online class, because they're not studying regularly and they do not understand what is being done in the class. Finally, we end up not taking the classes only. In the offline classes, we do intend to keep a lot of classes, 5 to begin with. This could be even 7, 8, 9, 10 classes a week, depending on your college examinations, or the college offs or public holidays. So keep in mind, whatever we are discussing on a particular day, do go back and study. Otherwise, you won't be able to follow what we are doing in the next class, and it will simply defeat the purpose of attending the live classes. As for difficulty, which chapters students generally find difficulty in. Project appraisal, chapter number 11, is where students do tend to face some issues. Last section of chapter 12, we will look at, again, this is a section which I have seen that students tend to struggle with it. Precisely the product I am talking about is something called index linked bond. Few of you do face difficulties in that. Beyond that, initially when you are studying, it will take you really some amount of time to grasp whatever we are covering from chapter 14 to chapter 17, because I guess close to 50 to 60 notations we would be describing there. These are completely new notations. You would have never seen them ever, most probably, unless you're pursuing actuarial science in your college as well. So 40, 50, 60 notations, a lot of them look similar. It will take some time to absorb them, and you would be able to appreciate, where to use this, how to calculate them, only once you start solving questions of chapter 19, 20, and 21. And this is the part where a lot of actually get a reality check. Once you will be starting practicing questions from chapter number 18 to chapter number 20, you will realize what CM1 is all about. It's just about sitting there, performing the calculations again and again, so that you can do it efficiently. And apart from that, chapter number 21, again, students do tend to sort of struggle in this particular chapter. Of all the chapters, I would say this is one of those chapters which actually does require a little bit application from you. Chapter number 22 is again one of those chapters where students struggle a little bit. Reason is that it has a bit more extensive use of integrals, and the ones who haven't, let's say, studied for CS2 previously, they might face a little bit of difficulty, because certain methods which we use it is not explained in detail. We take it just the way it needs to be done. A more, let's say, detailed understanding of it is covered in paper CS2. But again, studying CS2 is not a prerequisite for CM1. So chapter 21 and 22 is something where you would be facing certain issues. And also chapter number 24, which is competing risks. Apart from that, chapter 25 to 27, profit testing, if you have ever heard from your friends appearing from it, this is the chapter I would say of CM1. It actually includes concepts from chapter number 14 till chapter number 20, and also the knowledge of chapter number 24. So that is as good as, let's say, the main bulk part of the paper. Previous to 2019, it was almost given that a question from profit testing would be coming around 20 or so marks, and it takes a lot of time to perform the calculation. Again, it is fairly, I would say, straightforward. There are, let's say, just 3-4 different types of products in it. Once you get an understanding how to go about calculation, beyond that point of time, it is just calculation, because your formulas and everything are gonna remain the same only. So this is with the chapters. Again, for difficulty, I would say project appraisal is one, then joint life is another one, and then competing risks. These are the ones where at least application wise a lot of students struggle. In project appraisal, students generally struggle to come up with the right equation which needs to be used for performing the calculations. My intention is right now to start with chapter 2. In most of the terms, I used to cover till chapter number 9, and then I used to start with chapter number 14, complete till chapter 27, and then again come back to this part 2, which is chapter number 10 to chapter number 13. Reason was that a lot of do not study for the first 1 or 2 months in the beginning of the new session, and by the time I start with, let's say, chapter 14, 15 later, you all tend to cover the previous portions, and then effectively you do not understand anything, because it actually takes a lot of time to absorb content from chapter 14 to chapter 18. For this session, I still haven't decided whether I want to go completely serially. It depends how you all go about with your preparation. If things go good, I would be most probably going serially, but if I see that most of you aren't studying at a regular basis, then after chapter number 9, I intend to start with chapter 14 only, because even the number of classes required in paper B part is significantly higher from chapter number 14 to 27 onwards. Also, do keep in mind, you must have realized this if you have sat for any other paper. If you do not understand the paper A concept properly, you haven't studied for it. Just by attending a class, it does not serve the purpose. You need to sit and study yourself. You won't be able to follow anything in paper B. The first set of, let's say, 8-10 classes are going to basically brief you regarding the basics and the advanced Excel, nothing to do with CM1 as such. But after that, once Gunjan starts with the application of chapters, if you do not know your, let's say, the concept, you would be completely blank in that class. So do keep in mind of all the papers, not because you all are studying CM1 right now, you need to be extremely regular with this particular part. And it's the most scoring paper, let me repeat that. Again, it actually does not help whether you score very high marks or low marks. The higher you score, the better, but at least as of now, the companies do not take a look at your marks. Just because you score very high marks does not guarantee you getting a job, but obviously sets a good picture regarding your commitment. You have been very consistent with your preparation. So this was regarding the chapters and all. Now for practice, how to go about solving questions and all. After the end of each chapter, there would be certain number of questions available in institute material itself that you need to practice. In between chapters, there would be certain questions which would be there. Few questions I would be solving in the conceptual classes as well, so on. Apart from that, also do keep in mind the X assignments I talked about. That is something which is available at the end of the material only. Once you have received the hard copies, you would see that you have received 5 spirals for CM1. At the end of each spiral, you will basically see the X assignments. So the spirals have been given to you all, keeping in mind that first it covers the relevant chapters of part 1, and then it has the X assignment, whether it's part 1 or 2, so on, the questions of that, and then the solutions of it. In the material, first entire chapters are there, and then towards the end, the X assignment questions are there, and then towards the complete end of the PDF, you will see that there are basically the solutions of these X assignments. Again, one more thing, whenever you are practicing any questions, do make sure you are getting the final answer by solving it on paper or MS Word, whichever. Don't just take a look at the solution. because once you take a look at the solution, getting the equation will be easy. Here the trick remains to be able to solve that particular equation in a time bound manner. For other papers, there could be questions, whether it's CS1 or CS2, where you go completely blank. There could be a very difficult question or a very different type of question, and even if you devote 4 or 5 hours, you will not be able to crack it. In CM1, that is hardly the case. You would almost know how to solve the entire paper. It is just a matter of being able to solve within the stipulated examination time. And by performing the least set of I would say calculation errors, because there is a high tendency to make calculation errors in this particular paper. So apart from this, we would be sharing the most critical part of preparation to practice questions, which is the revision notes. Now do note in mind, the ones we would be sharing is the 2019 version. Please keep in mind this is completely relevant to the current syllabus or even going in future years, as long as the current structure of papers remains the same. Minor changes are there, that does not influence. Rest, this 2019 version is relevant whether you are sitting for the exam in 2022 or even in the future years, as long as the curriculum remains the same. The reason for using this version only is that we have been using a lot of we have prepared a lot of videos over the last 2-3 years, the numbering of which is regarding the using 2019 version only. So it's not possible to take 20 to 30 classes in a single term covering all questions using the latest set of version. So we will stick using the 2019 version only. There is no need of you all to get hold of 2022 version. Anything which is not there in the syllabus in this particular section, if at all, we would be informing you separately only. So do keep in mind, once you have enrolled in this session for CM1, you would be getting 2022 material. Once you have enrolled even a month or so back, you would have mostly got the 2019 version of material, which is again good to be used. If there are any other minor changes, we would be sharing relevant PDFs, which will be mapping the changes. So this remains the most important thing to practice. What it basically covers is the past year questions which have come in IFoA segregated chapter wise. So you will see that we have total of 13 booklets. The 27 chapters have been divided into 13 different booklets, where say booklet 1 covers chapter number 1, booklet 2 will let's say cover chapter number 2 to let's say 8, and so on. These are there. So this is the most important thing to practice. You should be targeting to complete this entire set of revision notes at least once, and post that, again, more importantly compared to any other paper, you have to sit for you have to be appearing for the past year papers under exam conditions, because as I said, you will be in a position to solve most of the questions. The only fact is whether you are being able to solve in the given time frame or not. So compared to other papers, this I have repeated a lot of times and will keep repeating. You need to practice a hell lot of them. Once you're done with this, once you are appearing from IFoA, this is the bare minimum target. You should be targeting to complete all papers between 2005 to 2022. We will shortly see from 2019 onwards. You basically need to take a look at CM1 examination. Before 2019, there were different paper names under the old curriculum. I would be shortly discussing that. What were the name of the papers, and which topics are there in our syllabus or which topics aren't there in our current syllabus. Once you are appearing from IAI, again, your first, I would say, thing to practice remains the revision notes 2019 version. After that, if you have a lot of time, maybe complete all IFoA papers, then start with IAI papers. In case you are short on time, instead of using IFoA papers, you could simply take a look at the IAI papers directly. Just keep in mind, the recent papers of IAI are relatively easier. I would say at times they're more easier even than the IFoA counterpart. But as you go to the previous years, specifically 2018 or earlier, the level of difficulty is way higher compared to what you see in IFoA. So once you are appearing from IFoA also, if you are practicing IAI papers, just keep this thing in mind. The relative difficulty is very high. So even in case you aren't being able to crack a question, don't get very demotivated, because the level of difficulty of questions which actually comes in IFoA and that which you will found in the past year papers of IAI is extremely different. So this was for the practice part. Next section is basically, mapping to the old curriculum. So CM1 basically consists of CT1 and CT5. Previous to 2019, we basically had something called CT series. So we have most of the topics from CT1 and similarly most of the topics from CT5. Just to give you an idea which chapters belong to which particular paper. Chapter number 1, Principles of Actuarial Modeling. This is from paper CT4. It's a theoretical chapter. Chapter 2 to chapter 13, entire part of it comes from CT1 itself. Do note that there were certain more sections in CT1 which now aren't part of CM1. They have been moved to other papers. From chapter number 14 till chapter 27, everything comes from CT5 only. Again, from CT5, prominently two topics are in our syllabus. One topic is pension fund. I am explicitly mentioning it because once you start giving job interviews and all, a lot of the work revolves around pension work as well. So right now in our curriculum, they haven't really covered anything about pension, at least in CM1. So you would have to study for that separately. Once you studied under the old curriculum, they at least had some basic idea about pension fund. And then there is another short chapter regarding mortality, morbidity, etc. What it means, we will see later, which was there in CT5, but is not a part of CM1. So from 2019, anything which is there in the paper is a part of syllabus. Before 2019, you need to take both CT1 and CT5. You will see that in CT1, close to 70% of the paper is a part of syllabus, and in CT5, close to 80% part of the paper is in our syllabus. So when you would be solving CT1 or CT5, ideally you should not devote more than 2 hours 15 minutes for CT1 paper, and you will realize that solving that is extremely easier. CT5, depending on how much marks is relevant to our current curriculum, just take it on a pro rata basis. If 80 marks is basically relevant to the current set of syllabus, you should be giving, let's say, 80% of 3 hour 20 minutes or 3 hour 30 minutes, depending whether you're sitting from IFoA or II. Ideally, I would say target within 2.5 hours for CT5 part, and the CT1 papers you should be targeting, if you want to be very conservative, 2 hours, else 2 hour 15 minutes should be the max you should be given. So this is the mapping of the old paper. Next, which I would be discussing is the ideal hours to devote for CM1. Now, compared to all other initial papers, you will see that if you take a look at the recommended hours in the IFoA website, it is the highest for CM1. You want a generic number, I will just say 400 hours. This is a very generic number and at the same time extremely misleading, because some of you might have devoted just 200 hours, cleared the paper. Some of you could have devoted 600 hours and yet not cleared the paper. It depends on the pace and how much how much of practice you're going with. So right now, especially for the ones who are appearing in the September session, you should be looking at, let's say, for the next 5 months, we have close to 150 days from today onwards. I guess the exam for CM1 is 11th and 12th or 12th or 13th of September. We have close to 150 days. You should be targeting at least 3 to 4 hours on average. I mean, if you want to give it more, do that. But this is the ideal target. You might calculate 4 hours, 150 days comes out to be 600 hours. But obviously, there would be certain days where you wouldn't be studying at all. Or if you are going at a very good pace, you might utilize your time to prepare for some other paper as well, or you might simply devote less hours going forward. At least right now, I would say devote at least 3 to 4 hours on average. If not every day, then at least on a weekly basis, you should be targeting anything between 20 to 30 hours per week towards CM1 preparation. After a point of time, especially once you enjoy solving questions and all, you would enjoy. In my experience, most of the students do enjoy studying for paper CM1. The ones who have actually appeared for CS1, and if they have enjoyed that, they generally tend to enjoy CM1 a bit less, because the structure of the papers are very different. But I would say most of the students end up enjoying the paper CM1. Specifically, if you are studying regularly, you will be able to absorb things very quickly. If you're not being able to understand in class, going back home, taking a look at the recorded lecture or going through material, it is just going to multiply the amount of time you need to, required to understand things. If you are studying regularly, being at par with class, it will take you, I would say, relatively less time, to understand the concepts and be at the flow. So this is regarding the idle hours for ones, who are working. Again, for you all, as many hours you can put in, 3-4 hours on a regular basis could be challenging, but for you all it should be, as many hours your work or your personal situation allows you to do so. Then ones who have sat for any actual paper previously, mostly you would have sat for CS1 if at all, or CS2, and you have given the online set of examinations. You can start solving everything on Word itself, or alternatively for the first 2-3 months till you are able to cover, let's say, half of the syllabus of CM1. For the interest of time only and understanding, you could try to solve everything on paper only. Then the last 2-3 months is something you should be practicing everything on MS Word itself. For ones who are studying for their first actual examination, my advice would be, do it on paper itself, because when you're solving on paper, you're not thinking about how to write, you're thinking about how to solve. The moment you try to do it on MS Word, it's not only a question of how to solve it, it's also a question of how to even write it. So that takes a bit of time, it becomes even a bit more irritating. Instead of thinking of the next step, you will be also thinking, how to put this particular symbol over here. So I would say, let's say once you're done with half of the syllabus, or if just 2 months are remaining, you should start practicing everything on Word, and eventually everything, whichever things you're doing, be it solving paper or whatever, should be on Word itself. There would be no separate live classes for how to go about typing on Word. Once you have studied for earlier paper, you will see a lot of things are similar, just that some more new notations are there. You just need to go about how to come up with this. We have released the entire set of mathematical typing videos. Those are available directly on our YouTube channel. Ones who are preparing for the first paper, again, you can just take a look at the CM1 mathematical typing playlist, and you will find close to 15 to 20 videos where we have covered all the important topics and the important symbols which needs to be used. Keep in mind, once you are appearing from IFoA, you have two options, or I should say three. You can either use complete mathematical typing, which basically means that we have certain notations like, let's say, 2ax, where 2 is superscript, x is subscript. You can put this entire thing on MS Word in this particular format. Alternatively, you can express this in words. Now, depending what this denotes, you will end up seeing, how you can express this in words. Either of them is available. IFoA has come up with their own notation sheet as well, which covers the frequently used symbols and what sort of short forms you could use. You can use that, or mathematical typing, or mix and match. Which one you should use is completely up to you, depending where you feel more efficient and where you're more comfortable. On a reading level, when you're trying to read your answers, obviously using notation becomes a lot more easier, but some of the students do find this more time consuming and challenging. Alternatively, you could do it using words or shortcut text as well. Just don't make up any random shortcuts on your own. Whatever you make, ensure an examiner would be able to understand what that is denoting. Again, something which we would be discussing more about in the, let's say, last 1 or 2 months of our preparation. So this was regarding MS Word. For ones who are appearing from IAI, if the exams are offline in nature in December, there is nothing to worry about. It's normal routine practicing on paper. For July term, exams are online. There is no notation sheet released by IAI as such. You can use mathematical typing or any textual words as well. But just keep in mind, whatever you use does make sense to the examiner. Specifically for giving from IAI, be a bit more careful with any sort of shortcuts you use, because the tendency to get step marks in IAI, historically, seeing the results is very less. With IFoA, there is a bit more structured marking, at least as of today. In IAI, that has not been the case, at least in my experience. Now, coming to it, as to how we're planning to go with the classes, we have 5 days right now scheduled: Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 11 a.m. and on Saturday, Sunday, what time is it? 12 p.m. 12 p.m. roughly 2 hours. Few of the classes could be 1 hour, 1.5 hours. Few classes could stretch to 2.5 hours or so. These are on average, for the next 3-4 months. We do intend to, keep paper A, paper B classes simultaneously. It could be at certain times, depending how you are going with the preparation, that all 5 classes in a week are pertaining to paper A, or 3 are pertaining to paper A, 2 are pertaining to paper B, or at some point of time all 5 classes are pertaining to paper B. That will just depend on the ones who are attending the live classes, be it online or offline, how you are progressing with your preparation. And we are thinking, till the time most of you have your colleges off for the next 1 or 2 months, we could keep classes almost every day, or even more than one class in a single day. Because of all the papers, CM1 is the most lengthiest, and it takes a lot of classes for us to cover the basic conceptual part as well. So we do intend to complete the syllabus latest by August 8th. If things go well, we might be able to cover it 1 or 2 weeks before. But for CM1, the chances of covering 1 month before the last date is very difficult. When I say last date, I mean 8th of August, because we will just shortly discuss how many classes it takes us to cover just the conceptual part. So by 8th of August is something we would be covering it. So ones who are appearing in the July term, do not rely only on the live online classes. You need to basically watch bulk of the stuff from the recorded lectures. As for ones who are giving from December term, do attend these classes. It's good that you would be in a position to cover up, complete your classes by August. Last 3 months or so, you can just devote towards practicing past papers under exam conditions. All of you do note that. Again, I will emphasize this not because you are studying CM1, but because this is CM1. Last 4 to 6 weeks should be completely devoted towards solving past papers. Cover up the concepts, that is, attending all the conceptual live classes or watching the videos, going through material, solving material questions, solving revision notes at least once. By, if I recall correctly, exam is 11th or 12th September. By, let's say, 10th August, that is latest. Ideally, let's say by July end only, you should be covering this once, so that in the last 4 to 6 weeks, you are only solving papers. And when I say solve the papers, it just does not mean you take a paper, you solve it, and then make your own estimate that this paper was good or bad. It will take you, let's say, 2.5 hours or 3 hours, depending whether you take CT1, CT5, or if you take CM1, it could take 3 hours, 20 minutes. That much amount of time, plus if even you're getting, let's say, 70 to 80% of it correct, it will take you 2 hours to check your paper, analyze where you're going wrong, and do documents separately. A lot of times you all feel that I am good in this topic, you're very confident about it, but yet you end up committing mistakes in that topic and not scoring that much in the examination. So instead of believing your priors, my strength lies in this topic or that topic, I would say give more emphasis to the data. See where you're losing marks. You will find which topics are consistently coming up, and that is where you need to basically work upon in the last 4 to 6 weeks. There is no point in covering the entire syllabus 2-3 times if you are having time constraints. Rather, you should be focusing on those topics where you are actually struggling, be it conceptual wise or be it question solving wise. So this is there. Apart from that, what was I going to discuss? Paper practice. Yes, anything else if I'm missing out? Yes, coming to the marking, a lot of you might not have actually had the, let's say, opportunity, I would say, or have never taken the effort to mark your own paper. So I understand that, at questions where you have made certain errors, it becomes difficult to know how much marks to give, how much step marks to give. Let's just take example, it's a 10 marks question, and say you're getting a final answer wrong. Most probably the solution scheme will have a couple of steps. Let's say it has 8 steps given. You have, you see that only 4 or 5 steps are correct. So out of 10, you can just take an estimate that, you would be getting, let's say, 5 to 6 marks out of 10, or let me just take it a bit more broad, 5 to 7 marks. Now, 5 would be on a very, let's say, pessimistic basis, 7 would be on a very optimistic basis. Do this for the entire questions. For the questions where you're getting everything correct, it will take very short time. You just need to see final answers matching or not. I mean, always start, I would say, with the final answer. If that is correct, I mean, then start looking backwards just to see that the number of steps you have given is appropriate or not. And in case the final answer is wrong, in that case, I will say start with the first step. Then see, what have you done, what is there in the solution, if a very descriptive solution is made there, and keep giving your marks. In a lot of places, you will actually see that they have awarded step marks as well. In which case, it becomes very easy for you all to mark yourself. But in most of the papers, you will not see that. So just make some rough estimate. Once you start doing it, after doing let's say 5-10 papers, you will be in a position where you have an idea, what sort of step marks you actually get. This way, let's say out of 100, or you could come up supposedly with a range of 65 to 80, and you would have an idea. 65 is a very conservative set of marks you might get. 80 could be a very optimistic marks. So you should be targeting, given how the paper is, forget clearing it, you should be targeting to get 80 plus, because trust me, it is doable. Of all the papers, I would say initially, this requires, I would say, the least amount of use of brain. It is just about your efficiency. You need to observe certain things, because when you will be performing calculations, certain type of questions under certain scenarios, it is better to use a, let's say, method one. Similarly, for certain other scenarios, you could use method one, but that will take a bit more time. So using method two would be simpler. It's not possible honestly to cover such 100 different scenarios. A lot of the, let's say, the frequently ones, we would be discussing separately in class how to go about tackling these questions. Rest is something which will only come when you're practicing it yourself and when you're observing it. Ki, "Acha, this question was there, I solved it in this way." Say the solution had it in a different way. Try to understand what they are doing and see whether that is a bit more shorter way or an efficient way or not. Because again, as I am repeating again and again, CM1 is all about performing your calculations accurately and efficiently. You will honestly know at least 90% of the paper A part if you have just completed at least once reading material questions and revision notes, and attended all the conceptual classes. So it is just a matter of whether you are being able to solve all of these accurately without making let's say the least amount of errors within the stipulated time. So this is regarding the CM1 part. Now I'll just leave it to you all. If you have any queries, anything, feel free to unmute yourself. Any doubts regarding preparation, anything, feel free to ask. Any one of you, any doubts regarding? Ones who are attending the online class, any doubts? You can use chat box, you can unmute yourself, feel free to ask. Again, academic doubts I will be taking in a separate forum. We would be shortly making the study groups specifically for doubts. Leaving that, if you have any other queries or doubts regarding CM1 paper, feel free to ask. Anything or wait, anything? Harsh? Preet? Dipti, anything? Any one of you once? If not, please put a no in the chat box. I'll then conclude the session. That was all from my end. I would be having my BCom honors exam in this month, in the month of August. So till when should I target to complete the syllabus? I mean, assuming let's say you have in the month of August, let's say first week of August, I'm not sure of the exact dates. You would let's say need to devote 1 or 2 weeks towards your preparation for in the month of July for the college exams. So target completing let's say by mid-July. I mean, whenever you intend to start preparing for your college exams, before that, do aim to complete the syllabus. Again, please do not stick to what we are doing in the class. If you want to go at a faster speed, you have access to the recorded lectures. The ones attending the live online classes or opted for pre-recorded lectures, just see the paper name. If you have any doubts, get back to me. And other than that, we would be letting you know through groups what is the intended studying pattern. So feel free to go at a faster pace than what we are doing in the class. When will classes start? So today was basically the introduction lecture starting from Monday, I would say. we would be starting with the conceptual classes. Also, this reminds me of one thing which I missed, is the number of conceptual classes we might require, for CM1A. So chapter number 1, it will take us roughly one class. Chapter 2, one class. Chapter 3, it could take two classes. Chapter 4 could also take two classes, makes it 6. Chapter 5 will take a very one short class. You will see it's a very small chapter, just 13 pages. That makes it 7. Then chapter 6, 7, 8, 9 all will take one class each. That makes it 11. Loan schedule, project appraisal again should take one class each, 13. Bonds, equity and property should take two long classes or three classes of, let's say, 2 hours each, makes it 16, I guess. Term structure of interest rates should, I guess, take two classes, makes it 18. Life table, two classes. Life assurance contract could take, let's say, two classes, or I could wrap up it in one as well. Life annuity contracts, again, two classes. This makes it, I guess, 18, 20, 24. Chapter 17 will take one class, 25. Chapter 18 will take us again, I guess, one class only. Chapter 19, one class. Chapter 21 class. 21, 22 again one class. 23 also one class. Chapter 24 will take us two classes. And chapter 25 to 27, it should take us one class each. So you are seeing that we are getting close to 20, 22, 23, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 31, 32, 33, close to 35 classes. These are just the conceptual ones. Doubt classes, question solving classes would be over and above this. Now, depending on the time requirement, given that September is slightly a shorter session, you get close to 5 months for preparation time compared to April term, where you could get close to 7 months. If we see that we are lagging behind a bit in syllabus, if you are not going at par, we intend to complete the syllabus by any, like, 8 August is the deadline. So depending if we see that we need more doubt classes, we need more classes of question solving, it could happen that for few of the chapters which we feel the chapters are relatively easier, or the content we have in videos is very nice, we would ask you all to just take a look at the videos, and we would actually use the live classes to questions practice for it, or take up a doubts for it. So that is something which we are going to depend on how it goes about. The intention is to cover conceptual classes of all the chapters, but again that might change depending how time goes ahead. So this was another thing I had to mention. Coming back to you all, any other doubts you all have? Also, one more thing, the mode of language is going to remain English only. In case you're not being able to understand anything, once the class gets over, separately feel free to ask. If I'm more comfortable in Hindi, I'm perfectly fine in that. At least in class, do try to keep the language English only, as a lot of the students here are non-Hindi speaking students. So try it in English. In case I'm not being able to make you understand after the class, I'll again take it up, and if some other language is required, feel free to discuss that. No issues with that. So I see nothing else. In that case, I would be wrapping up the class. Thank you, everyone.